the stinking lesbian like, oh my gosh. Oh, it was beautiful. Designed? Drew me up, designed me, and whatever. There's people. Hey, I'm back with my second video. I'm feeling kind of femme today. I'm not really sure. I'm kind of still both, but I'm like pretty much femme today. Pretty much femme. Story for today is how I knew I was gender fluid. There are actually studies that show that kids as young as 5 or 4 years old know what gender they are, regardless of the societal norms that have been forced upon them or their actual biological sex. They understand gender, the differences in what they actually are. You can ask a 6-year-old if they're transgender, and they'll be able to say yeah, with total understanding and conviction. It's amazing. Where am I going? It really started when I was younger, probably elementary school, maybe even younger than that, but I just knew I wasn't a girl. It was one of those things where I could just feel it, but I didn't know the term, and my parents were very, you're a girl. What was cool about it though is that my parents accepted my tomboyishness. Though they didn't accept me as fully gender fluid, they accepted me as not being very feminine. Skip ahead a few years, confusing middle school, confusing high school, that whole big deal, and then college. And college is where I really started to understand the LGBTQ community. It wasn't until I got to college that I understood how large the community was and how important it was specifically to me. I did multiple projects on transgender because for a long time that's what I thought I was. I struggled for about a year to figure out if I was transgender or not. And I'm not, I figured that out, I know now, but it was a good year or so where I was internally debating if I was transgender. I figured out that I wasn't transgender. I don't have dysphoria for my body, I'm totally accepting that I am in a female body, but it took me a while to figure that out. So then once I figured out I wasn't transgender, well then I had this giant hole because I was like, well then what am I? So I had that second problem of, what am I if I'm not transgender? Well, welcome Tumblr. I held off for getting a Tumblr for a very long time, and it was actually purposeful. I knew what Tumblr was, and I knew it was a great community, but I stayed away from it. Why? Because I knew I would use it to procrastinate. And I did. And I do. A lot. Until Legend of Korra happened, it finished, and spoiler alert, Korra saw me as canon. So I literally watched the finale of the episode, understood that Korra saw me was canon, and then freaked the fudge out. I lost my mind. I just had to get more of it. I had to get fanfics, I had to get pictures, I had to get drawings, I had to get information. And where was all that? But Tumblr. I knew that trans star and transgender was an umbrella term for a lot of different things fitting underneath that, but I didn't know what was underneath that. I just knew it was an umbrella term. But it wasn't until the Trans Day of Visibility that I started to learn all the other terminology. So there was this little message board thing that you pop up on this Tumblr, and it had all these different words on it: bigender, androgynous, gender fluid, agender, and I was like, the heck is this? I actually did think that gender was a binary, so I googled it. So I started out with androgynous because I felt that was more like me, and I was like, nah, it doesn't work. And then I went to bigender, so I looked that up and I was like, no, that's still not right. And then I found gender fluid, and then I was reading over it one last time, and then it just clicked. I just knew. I understood it. I had a term to call myself gender fluid. It was amazing. I was sitting in my suite watching some movie with about 3 or 4 of my other schoolmates around. I'm going on Tumblr and I see this term and I Google it and I figure out I'm gender fluid, and I look up my roommate and goes, hey, do you know what gender fluid is? And she's like, yeah, I think I'm gender fluid. She just went, yes! And it was more for the fact of me figuring myself out than actually being gender fluid or anything like that. So that was probably a great beginning. I knew something was wrong. I didn't have a term for it until I got to college, but then once I did, I was like, that's it, that's what I am. It's just a matter of finding the term. If you know that you don't belong in your body, or you don't really like this certain sex or gender, you don't feel right in this situation with this gender, then you're probably right. You're probably not that straight up thing. You're probably not just straight cis. You're probably not just straight heterosexual. Like, there's something different, and that's not wrong. It's just different. That's all it is. If you are feeling like that, go to Tumblr, go to Google, just start looking up stuff about that word or what you're feeling or anything like that. You're gonna find some kind of term or series of informations or panels or Tumblr infographics or stuff like that. Yeah, that's basically it. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know for a really long time what it was. And then I found the term and I was like, ba-da-ding, I'm gender fluid. And so that's basically what it was. That's how I knew I was gender fluid. I will definitely see you next time. Bye, chicas.